So begins another draft physics video production. Comments, lots of crappy ones, but whatever. Some good ones thrown in, so we'll see what we can make of it. The internet, you know, human race, mostly shit. Anyway, I watched a video on very strong magnetic levitating, very strong magnet levitating a strawberry as well as droplets of water. I've also discovered that dry ice in magnetic levitation train systems is not only a cooling substance for magnetism medium, but becomes magnetic itself. So yeah, the fact is that a strong magnetic field will make everything that is polar inside of you tend to line up, and when it lines up, it becomes magnetic. So that's the simple obvious argument that we know from like iron is that you can make it magnetic by just putting it's sympathetic, it wants to be magnetic, but the heat problem, temperature, keeps it from being magnetic because there's just too much movement of the atoms. They're getting jostled around a lot, and they just move around a little too much, for their innate polarization to mean anything. And so it's only when they're in the presence of a magnetic field that they have a damping, a quieting of that heat. They prevents the heat from vibrating them as much, so they just still they stay within the boundaries. Okay, they don't wobble as much, and therefore their ability to be a magnet is increased. All right, I'm so sad to report that I still can't deliver counterpoints for you to refute. Yeah, well, you're sad. But anyway, as these things, in my view, still point towards your conclusions more than anything else. Yes, but of course I have no way of examining the iron content of either of those substances. Well, it's just not about iron. There's lots of elements, you could argue, or atoms, that probably have some polarization. Okay, it's just that they don't end up having a geometry that's conducive to magnetism, in the sense that their geometry, and they end up in circles or something. You could lots of substances. The difference between like a diamond and graphite, is the fact that the atoms are lining up in a configuration that creates rigidity, like a circle. So if you put your wagon trains in a circle, you could sort of understand that you're sort of losing any benefit of horse wagon, because it's all circular, and so the filters are all exactly opposite each other as you go around. Just for every horse wagon, you have a wagon horse on the other side. So it defeats any purpose you might have in terms of creating a strong magnet. All right, I think it's enough. Who am I? Probably an asshole. Easily categorized. I mean, can't even start with a capital. Just one. Well, if a photon is real, how can it speed up after? Question mark. So they just keep ignoring the argument. I mean, in the video, I no doubt made the argument that it doesn't speed up. No physicist really thinks it does. I mean, the real physicists. They understand that like a substance like water or a substance like glass that's transparent, that isn't transparent because the photon goes straight through it and doesn't hit anything. It's transparent because the photon is actually hitting a lot of stuff. And by hitting stuff, by interacting with it, the interaction takes time, and therefore the photon isn't really slowing down. I mean, it's just taking time, taking a crooked path. So where light just goes straight through, say, the atmosphere pretty quick, it goes even quicker, okay, in space. That's why they say the speed of light in a vacuum, or speed of light in some pure state, because every other state it'll be a little bit slower through any other medium, because the medium implies it has to interact with something called matter, and what it's really interacting with fundamentally is protons or electrons. And those interactions involve the electron and the proton being moved by the photon, and the electron and proton don't move the speed of light. So if you have to if you're riding a tricycle and then, you got a certain tricycle speed. Well, let's use bicycle. All right, and you can pedal 30 miles an hour and in free space. And I force you to get onto a tricycle. You're not going to go as fast. So, it's going to look like you're getting somewhere slower, but you really aren't getting somewhere slower. It's not like bicycling went slower. It's just that you had to go through a transition that slowed you down, in the sense that you had to go. The simple argument is the light is traveling more distance. So to move the electron moves in some other direction, the photon moves. It has to kind of go around the atoms. You could even think of it that way. If you think of it just interacting with electrons, then it has to go in, hits the electron, has to go around the atom, get to the other side, go around. And so it's a longer path. And so all you're saying is that you walk faster going downhill than uphill or something. Well, of course you do. It doesn't mean you speed up. It doesn't mean there's anything you have to account for except the simple fact that you've changed the environment. And of course, you're doing the same thing. So, there's so many ways to illustrate. You could put a motor on a boat, and you could have a current that's only 5 miles an hour, and the boat goes a certain speed. I could increase the current to 30 miles an hour you're going against, and now the boat doesn't go the same speed. It doesn't mean the motor changed at all. It doesn't mean anything changed in the structure of the photon. It just means the medium changed. What it has to interact with changed. So anyway, they just ignore the arguments. This is just typical of these cranks and dissidents. There's a perfectly provided counter argument, like the flat earth argument should be over in 30 seconds because there's so many proofs that what they're claiming is impossible. And so this is just such, you obviously just don't care about the truth. You just care to keep making propagandist liar statements. You just want to keep defending your overt propagandizing. And that's all you're doing. Okay, where does it get the extra energy? There's no extra energy needed. Glass is solid. It's heavy. Go pick up a piece of glass. It's pretty heavy. Do you think the photon's just flying right through it? Is that your perception? Because it's not a physicist's perception. You can't throw a ball, for example, through water and see it speed up after. And again, who's arguing that it does? Nobody. Nobody's arguing it slowed down in the first place. And obviously the ball example is pretty stupid because the ball doesn't have a consistent way to travel, so it's not even going to get through the water. There's no evidence the light slows down. There's only evidence that the path the light travels is longer because it's not going straight anymore. Duh. And yeah, you don't understand his theory behind his idea yet. No, I don't understand why you people are so just clinging to some religious notions that some guy 2,000 years ago had the truth. You're idiots. Yet commenting on it. Smart job. No, I read his book. It's incomprehensible gibberish. A bunch of useless quotes from long dead people who didn't have nearly, not even half the information we have. And you're saying they knew the truth. You're saying if you were going to go to a doctor, you'd dig up some guy that was 2,000 years old and go to him. He'd give you an apple a day. Say thank you very much. What's going to take you serious, but you don't understand his idea. Peace. There's no fucking peace, asshole. You're a rude, obnoxious piece of shit. I don't wish you any kind of fucking peace. I wish you a piece of a sledgehammer. The heavy piece. Fuck you. Who am I? You're an asshole. The asshole. There, should I call you that? The asshole who is the asshole. The mega. Be back. Alright, continuing. Alright, your explanation of magnetic damping cleared up a lot of things for me, especially regarding the coil phenomenon. Yeah, well, coils, I really shouldn't go into all this stuff, but that's never really explained. They just tell you, well, this is what it does, and there's no field outside, there's only field inside, blah, blah, blah. And, there's just no accounting for what it's doing. And it seems like the obvious thing it's doing is obviously creating a surface on the inside. That means nothing gets through the surface on the inside, so whatever energy's in there is reflecting. And it just seems like the obvious explanation, but you never hear that as an explanation because they don't understand what energy is. Anyway, the way I think about it now is that when the circuit is closed, the copper atoms can more easily arrange in a well-ordered closed loop. Well, they'll choose a path. Okay, that's the point of the whole thing. And essentially, they've got to choose the path because there's no preferential path. So yeah, they can end up in very small rectangles, which add up to magnetism. It's just really about length versus width of your movement. You have to do more movement in one dimension than you do in the other dimensions if you want your magnets to work, right? So you don't want to line up a bunch of magnets this way and then a bunch of magnets this way and then some magnets this way. You want to try to have them all going the same way as often as possible. And so yes, the idea is if there's not a set path, then that's more likely to happen. There's no obvious choice of path. No, there is an obvious choice of path. So you're more likely to go the chosen path. So yes. So the closed circuit with the coil represents the fact that the energy does go in one direction. So you're more likely to line up the atoms because the pressure is moving. In the open circuit, the pressure can't move, and you can't go the direction you want to go in because there's already stuff in your way. You're building up the positive charge, and it takes more effort to make the voltage, you could argue, the voltage differential. Anyway, so there's more not going straight. I said probably more than I needed to. Straight lines are really helpful with magnetism. That's all that needs to be said. Okay, anyway. If the circuit is open, the looping back of the arrangement of dipoles has to happen within the small wire. Well, it's going to polarize one wire. One end of the wire will go positive, one end will go negative. And that represents higher pressure at one end. And how do you make higher pressure in a system where you're trying to find the shortest path, right? You don't move up a hill unless something's forcing you to. Anyway, and this probably disturbs their overall arrangement too much. It means they move in too many directions. I thought a bit about copper atoms. Please don't be too harsh if I'm hilariously awful. I'm no expert on copper atoms. Anyways, the conventional model says the electrons of a regular copper atom are configured in a 2 plus 8 plus 18 plus 1 shell type way. Yeah, well, the whole idea that the extra electron by itself is always going to make an atom reactive. That would be the simple generic statement, I guess. That means one electron is further away from the center or in a higher orbit than most of them in the orbit below is densely populated. Even if you doubt their model, I doubt the movement of the electrons. I don't doubt that they are configured like the rings on a magnet. All right, the electrons are obeying the same rules. The electrons don't like each other. The rings that you see with iron filings on a magnet are all lining up with the same polarity magnetically, which means they repel each other. So that's why they're at a distance from each other. And yes, atoms are doing the same thing. There's electrons, then the next row of electrons has to be a distance away because the electrons hate each other. So clearly, that's the way it has to work. They repel each other. They create reflections between each other that trap energy, which means there's pressure between them. Even if you doubt their models, I only doubt the fact that they're spinning, they're moving. There should be some amount of truth to having one singular electron in the outer shell. Yes, well, I just said that. Long story short, copper's well-tested chemical reactivity is similar to other atoms that are also modeled with one outer shell electron. Right, so I already said that. Generally speaking, imbalance means you will connect to things. Balance means you're not going to easily connect to things. In your model where electrons don't orbit at all, maybe one could imagine the copper atom as a sort of weird Pac-Man-esque dipole. Pac-Man didn't seem very polar, but whatever. If you imagine the yellow parts of Pac-Man, those should look lightly net positive, while its barely open mouth, the singular electron, could look comparatively net negative. Yes, but it's not going to go chompy chomp. So if you imagine lots of those atoms, it seems obvious they'd be inclined to arrange in circular or snaky patterns. I don't know about the circular thing. Patterns, yes. Triangles, squares, circles, yes. Another fact I've encountered is that there seems to be a decent amount of copper 2 plus ions in nature, where 2 electrons are missing. Seems intuitive as to why they'd be sort of stable, since it leaves a net positive hole where the outer electron of the regular Cu atom could slot in. But see, the trick is you have to slot in to something that has the same kind of pressure that you're under. So if the electrons are, in this ring idea, and you try to mix something with a third ring with a first ring, you could sort of understand that those electrons are going to be more or less pressure between them, and so you can't really mix mixed pressure. Because they would end up expanding, and being out of place, proportional to the nucleus they're trying to attach to. I mean, they're being attracted to the protons, so there has to be a balance between that attraction and the repulsion of the electrons, and that balance won't work if the distance from the protons aren't the same. Wherever there's one of these, because the proton of the other atom will end up influencing the other electrons. There has to be a balance between the protons, the nucleuses, and there has to be a balance between the electrons. So you're not just filling an electron hole. You also have to fill it based on not introducing another proton that's more influential than the proton that the electrons are already attached to. Where there's one of those pairs in a piece of copper, the negative sides of the Cu atoms would be inclined to face it, and it would probably attract another imperfection. Well, the fact that all the metals are crystals, and so that's another component of this. So obviously they form in a geometric structure, but it's not one crystal, So those crystals aren't durable with distance, and you can only get away with it for a certain size, and then the crystal breaks, the function breaks down, it creates a new crystal. If those assumptions are correct, this should give a rough idea of the categories of arrangements we can expect in a piece of copper. Without the presence of a magnetic field, the Cu2 plus items would probably dictate the overall arrangement. Now, if a magnet approaches, I'd say it would turn and twist some of those Pac-Man dipoles. Yeah, I don't think they're dipoles until the magnet shows up, so that's the point I would make to you, is that when the magnetism shows up, that's extra force being introduced into the atoms. It energizes the electrons, and by doing that, giving them more pressure, and that pushes them a little further from their nucleus, and that dipoles them, forcing the rest of them to rearrange as well in a sort of domino effect. Well, the point is let's say I'm an atom, and the energy comes in the top. Then my top is going to expand, and then through the process it will go through me, so to speak, to my feet, and then at my feet it's going to influence the next guy and expand his head, and then he's going to do the same thing. So you have to think of it as they're only for a moment in a certain condition, and then once that moment passes, they're not in that condition anymore. So you're just going like a timed equation. You're just saying how much time are they in the condition where their head is big and their feet are small. All right, and the point is if you're in that condition more than you're in this condition or this condition, then you're polarized over time. You know, over a second of time, you're going to be this more than you're going to be that. And that's the only thing you need to do to create this phenomenon, is spend more time in one condition. All right. Without the presence of the magnetic field, the CO2 ions would probably dictate the overall arrangement. Now, if a magnet approaches, I'd say they turn and twist. Okay, you're right. So the iron atoms don't need the force to make them polar, where the copper atoms need the force to polarize the atoms. They're not polarized before the force shows up, I would argue. Another aspect of the phenomenon that needs explaining is why the magnetization of the copper is only temporary. It's only temporary because it's a conductor, and the polarization effect, the big-headedness, is only a temporary effect. You seem to prefer the mirror idea to explain the repelling or braking effects, but how would you then explain that the magnetic response of the copper plate stops again? Well, it stops again because it's a conductor and the pressure is equalized through the whole substance, and so it's again negated in the end and everything depolarizes. So everything goes back to some native state. And it might remain charged to some extent. Okay, and then the magnetic response of the copper stops again, even if the magnet is still close by. Well, that's just the argument about how many atoms you're pressurizing. So you can't pressurize the atoms effectively, right? They don't become magnets until you first pressurize them, so you have to first pressurize them. And the whole point is that if you're not moving the magnet, then all the rays are going into one place, and you're not creating enough magnetic atoms to turn. So you're not making enough magnetic atoms, therefore you can't turn them. So there's two processes. There's first me polarizing you, and then there's me turning you. All right. Why does the mirror break down again? It breaks down because it's a conductor. I'm still inclined to think the more elegant way of modeling this vis-a-vis the release of trapped force bits between copper atoms. While the copper atoms turn, twist, and rearrange in response to the magnet, they somehow spit back force bits of the same color onto the magnet. The energy has to come from somewhere. So again, we're back to this energy argument. You're not really introducing polarization of energy that already exists. So you can only get the polarizing effect. You can't get more energy. And the way you make more energy is to move the magnet. Then you have more energy in the system. But that would be the only way to do it. I have to admit, I still don't have any idea of the exact process that would cause this. I don't know. The reason I like this idea anyway is that it puts a natural timer on the induced magnetic properties of copper, and it makes them naturally proportional to the rate of change in the magnet. The magnetic field. So again, the magnetic field is just the field, filtered, segregated for the type of thing it reflects off of. The rate of change is proportional to how much the copper atoms have rearranged after all. The rate of change is proportional to how much the copper atoms have rearranged. Well, again, it's just the density kind of argument. How many are now polarized? This is the thing. You need to polarize as many as possible to have any visible effect. After the atoms have rearranged into the new stable configuration, the copper plate would then reabsorb the approximate amount of force bits it has emitted. Whatever. Not sure if this is a valuable input. Some thoughts anyway. I'm probably missing some really obvious things. Well, anyway, it's kind of a detailed conversation, and I've pointed out. I mean, it'd be good to get, take this to that next level of explaining the structure of the 100 elements, and talk about, what kind of configurations create polarity and all that stuff. It's not invalid. I'm just saying I can't do everything, so it's a little. I don't think it's. I mean, I got to do the physics before I do the chemistry, and I just think the physics doesn't encroach on the chemistry at all. Nothing about the chemistry is in doubt. Chemistry, we don't have nearly as many disagreements about the basic interpretation of what's happening in an experiment. I mean, you burn a piece of paper, you can have an explanation of the chemistry. That's not going to be very controversial. You might find this interesting if you haven't seen it already. Curious what you think. Punching water so hard light comes out. Yeah, so this is, I won't even bother going to it. If you want to, you can. This is, there's a little shrimp in the deep ocean that, does its claw so quickly that it actually heats the water and basically releases hydrogen and oxygen, and through that process, makes bubbles and the whole thing, and through that process releases some photons. So it's basically electrolysis, or whatever you want to call it, well, the thing where you electrify the water and break the molecules. It's actually breaking the molecules, by just snapping so quickly, creating a whole bunch of pressure. The pressure makes it possible to separate the hydrogen and the oxygen, and in that process it releases a few photons. So yeah, nothing. I don't think their physics will be that much different than my physics. Your simulation is getting a lot better. A job well done. Yes, the person who's doing it is doing a good job. I guess there's some. I'm not doing any of the programming part yet. But you do have to do some thinking about how you take a process and convert it into a simulation in terms of the thing you're trying to model has billions of little parts, and you're trying to do it with 14. So that conversion's a little tricky. Making the Empire State Building out of popsicle stick kind of argument. The sticks, the pieces of wood can't be heavier than the material, the density, or the whole thing falls apart, blah, blah. There's some things you have to consider. All right. Clearly, the simulation software demonstrates the truth of the equation 2b squared equals hip. I mean, what does that even mean? It doesn't say anything. It's just nonsense. I just really don't understand why you exist, Huey. Alright, so this is a out of the blue thing. Macule CS, what are your computer specs, if you don't mind? Yeah, I'm using a pretty, it's a pretty crappy computer, but the good thing about it is it's really energy efficient. And I bought it cheap. I mean, it cost me $100, and I got I got a monitor with it. So it's a good deal. And it sleeps well. It does the things you need sometimes, and so so I just happen to be in efficiency mode. And my better computer only runs Windows XP, and it's adds a better graphics card, which is the important thing for most of the video crap I'm doing. I mean, obviously it can run Linux, but I have XP on it for some reason. No, I run Linux. Yeah, I switch. That's right. I use the same computer, and I switch the operating system. But the downside is it's in pieces. It's not in a case, and I just don't have space for things. So I'd probably be using that one if it wasn't that it's just too inconvenient right at the moment. Well, anyway, so I don't need to go through all that crap. Anyway, Gary, you need a better computer. I can send you one for free. Let me know if you're interested. Well, I'm always interested in free stuff, frankly. So, free computer, yeah, I'm always interested. But email me or something. Um, software not included with an asterisk. DraftScience, yuck. Well, whatever. Yeah, it's a it's not a great computer. So what? I'm just whatever. Yeah. Yeah. It, I guess everything is just so right now. My life still hasn't settled to something. And the weird part is that I can sort of imagine now using a better computer because I'd only use it like an hour a day or something. So it wouldn't be running all the time like in the old days. But you can do so much stuff on these tablets and stuff. I have a bunch of broken tablets, that you can connect a mouse to, and they still, the touch thing doesn't work, but I can still use them. And then, I find that you can do a lot of just web page kind of crap using a tablet or something. So some of the stuff I was doing on the computer I could just do on the tablet, at 10 watts, versus 600 watts for a power computer kind of thing. Well, anyway, I need to upgrade because I need to do some more interesting things, but I'm getting by, so whatever. I can't say I desperately need anything. I mean, I'd like to just say, yes, donate me money, donate me computers, give me lots of free stuff. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But yeah, I'm sort of a good cause, but I'm just saying, I'm not going to ask for it because I'm not desperate. I mean, I just feel like I should be desperate before I ask for anything. Yeah. What are you smoking? Maybe it's the problem. Are you paid for this? Yeah, whatever this scummy, stupid, all capitals name means. Totally meaningless mush. Thank you for that. Oh, now more caps. If you put all your money into your education, so he does it with a colon comma. I mean, all money in the world is not enough. Sorry. So wow, you really totally defeated my physics with that. Yeah. Wow. I'm so embarrassed and ashamed. Oh God, people are just so fucking stupid. Alright, this is a big one. Sorry, there's a lot of long comments, sort of. Anyway, I noticed that you referenced the charge state of particles. Oh, no, I really don't. I reference two things, protons and electrons as charged, okay? And I never say electrons have a state. Their charge is always their charge. They're always negative. Protons are always positive. Electrons aren't dipoles. Protons aren't dipoles. They don't have states. It's just nonsense. Okay, the fact that conventional physics thinks there's some sort of half spin or some other kind of bullshit. No, there's no such thing. All right. Quite a lot in your explanation. No, I really don't. So you didn't notice anything real. You just injected bullshit. So you just, as the Ken Wheeler folk tend to do, you just falsely premised your irrational mush. I hope you realize that no such charge state actually exists. Well, obviously you haven't proven anything. You haven't proven electrons aren't negative and protons aren't positive, so until you do that, sorry. The volume of evidence that exists is a volume of evidence. You want to pretend it doesn't exist? Then go ahead, be an asshole. Those labels are just left over from earlier failed theory. No, they're really not. They just kept getting more and more verified with time. Now let's understand, Maxwell didn't know about electrons and protons, but he knew what charge was, idiot. Niels Bohr was asked specifically, again, who cares? You think that's the way you defeat a theory, is to say somebody said something once? No, you cite evidence, shithead. Okay, Niels Bohr was asked specifically about the remaining charge state labels, and he replied that they had become purely symbolic and not representative of any real property. Well, again, the real property of charge is established by evidence, by experiments. And you're insane if you doubt it in some way. It's why magnets are polarized. It's why there's a north and a south end, because they're basically imitating an electron and a proton smashed together. That, in fact, it had been long established that charge states, played no role whatsoever in the structure or stability of atoms. Well, obviously they don't, because there's no such thing as a dipole electron or a dipole proton. So again, you've taken a statement and misinterpreted it. There's nothing in the stability of an atom that there's no theory of an atom's stability that can be made out of some notion that electrons have a positive side somewhere that they're hiding. It doesn't work as a model. No matter where you look at an electron from, it's always an electron. It's got the same face on its ass as on its face. Okay. That said, I'm not opposed to your assertion that tiny force bits interact to explain the behavior. Well, you sound like somebody who's got a problem, and in some cases the structure of atoms. Then why are you reciting this standard model to me when I've already debunked it with a better model? I just don't think the interaction is one of charged states or charged forces. Well, I don't. So you just said I'm not opposing your theory, yet I'm opposing its foundation, which is, yes, there has to be two kinds of force to interact with the two kinds of material object, and they inversely interact, and that's how you can explain repulsion and attraction happening in seemingly exactly the same way. The same event creates these two opposite effects, and the only way you can do that simply, the only way you can have a game of checkers is you have to have red and black squares, and you have to have red and black pieces. If you don't do that, you can't play the game, because you can't tell the board from the pieces anymore. You know what I mean? You have to have these rules, or you can't create the interactions. Instead, material structures and behaviors can better be explained with simple deflections of those fundamental bits that collectively form concentrations and act as the surface of material structures. Well, I'm just saying, no, they can't. You can't do it without charge. You can't create a mechanism that creates attraction 1 minute and repulsion the next minute without having some mechanism to do that, some inverse mechanism that creates very high pressure in one circumstance and very low pressure in another circumstance. I just changed one little fact, and all of a sudden they're shooting right into each other. And I changed that one little fact, and then they're running away from each other as fast as they can. You can't do that with nothing. You have to do it with some kind of mechanism, and I'm saying the simplest mechanism is to create the checkerboard. So, well, it's a stupid comment, but I'll leave it. Alright, mine does it simpler. So that doesn't say anything. It only involves whatever this is, fatigues, like he's an ex-military, mass murderer. It only involves one type of object and a single mechanism. Well, good luck with that. You have no chance, in my opinion, using one object and one interaction. That won't work. 1 + 1 physics is not going to work. Happening on a fundamental level, whatever that means. Fundamental level is it has ESP and can figure out what somebody's doing 15 feet away. No. I'm arguing that physics is physics. There has to be physical interactions for things to happen. Real things have to interact with real things. Nothing can't interact with nothing. Everything else, including the material structures of atoms and their properties, along with the wider interactions like gravity, can be explained with common waveform interferences. Says you. And there's no common waveform. There's no elemental wave. So again, you're mixing two subjects, fundamental and elemental, with something like emergent, which are waves. Waves are made of wave is group behavior. Debunk that somewhere. That's what waves are. Waves are group behavior. There's no elemental wave. So just fuck this wave, these stupid people and your stupid fucking goddamn sissy waves. Jesus. Anyway. The Cat in the Hat, written badly. I think it's pretty cool that you actually did a computer simulation of something resembling your model. Kudos for that, although I would say it doesn't really help, since it doesn't prove that there isn't still a function velocity problem. Well, sorry, but I already explained how there clearly is a velocity problem. I'm saying the evidence demonstrates quite clearly that electrons and protons, I don't know why Richard Feynman couldn't figure this out, but that electrons and protons need to be constantly pushed. You stop pushing them, they stop going. You can't throw them in space like a wrench and have them just go forever. So, I mean, that's a fact. Yeah, drag is real. But obviously, we know that material objects, that somehow helium nuclei get around that fact somehow. Somehow they get around the fact that their electrons and protons don't want to keep going forever. And somehow the mechanism, there's some trick to it. And I've explained the trick. So I've done my job, shithead. But nevertheless, good job on the personal growth development. Fuck you in the ass thing. I have no doubt that this is related to the fact that you have to clean your room every day. No, I don't. And I still don't. Now that you're living with others. Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with it. So, fuck you. It's still bullshit. It's still a silly way to define... I mean, I could take pictures of the front yard that I maintain, you know. I mean, there's things you need to keep orderly and nice and things you don't. And if you have some stupid notion in your head that the only people who get anywhere in the world are Felix Ungers, I'll make the counter argument that no, those people never get anywhere because they spend their whole life nitpicking. They waste insane amounts of their day, okay, on nonsense. And that all the people saying clean your room are probably people who hire maids. You know, so fuck you. Anyway, the way you maintain your own personal living space can have a profound effect on your mental habits. And I would argue that that's part of my argument. You give a shit about nit and picking, and I couldn't give a crap about that unsubstantive nonsense. I just really couldn't care less. I'm judging it based on the content of its character. You're basing it based on how polished the chrome is. Fuck you. Jordan Peterson and your father, no doubt, had that right all along. Well, how do you don't know my father from anything. So again, where did I make the argument that my father was a neat freak? No, he really wasn't. He was logical and organized, and I would argue that I am also. It's just that I happen to have more interest than my father did. My father liked fishing, okay, and going on vacation. He didn't have, you know, it just wasn't that complicated for him. It's more complicated for me. Jeez. I have lots of interests. Computers. You know, my father never did, you know, I wonder if my father, if, you know, computers had caught up to him. You know, who knows what kind of, you know, because I think he'd really have found it quite absorbing, you know, and he might end up with quite a collection of computer rubbish. By the way, what do you mean by two kinds of force filter, the electrons and the protons? Well, I mean, I've been over it so many times, I mean, I can't. It's fundamental to the whole fucking point of the theory is the argument that the force comes in, okay, mixed, red and blue, purple, and that the magnet basically makes all the blue light go this way and all the red light go that way. Is there any other way to explain it for you? I mean, it's electrons reflect one kind of color, blue, and protons reflect the other kind of color, red. So if there's a field of purple, the proton will be reflecting the red and just passing the blue, and the other one would be doing the opposite, and that makes a huge difference when they're interacting with each other. What does filter mean in this context? I mean, this is like, you haven't paid any attention to any of this, have you? Perhaps it's like a cigarette filter filtering out the carcinogenic. There's not, the filters don't filter out anything, you know, significant. They prevent the fire from going down your throat. That's about all the filters do. Bent space particles from the lungs of the blossom of vitreous itself. What are you doing here? Thing two. Anyway, I know what is really lame. This channel is real lame. Wow, another impressive comment. You know, yes. So will you make a channel so I can type that there? Because I'm a real smart person, and that's what smart people do. You know, it's just type crap that any fucking retard could type on any channel on Earth and be annoying and irritating. Wow, you're so original. Not. All this Dr. Seuss crap. Clearly all this from the same lunatic. So the Cat in the Hat and that guy, all the same lunatic called the Cowboy. All right, I think it's pretty cool that you actually did a computer. Kudos. Although I'd say, so is it back to still? It's still the same personal, same. She's typing the same shit over and over. Oh, great. Maybe YouTube's just not deleting it very effectively. All right. So why should a physicist know your system works without seeing the computer simulation? And he says this one twan, two twans. So again, just, real adult argument. I explained it. We have to use thought experiments all the time, and to get the elevator experiment, does Einstein actually have to draw you an elevator? You can't use your own mental skills to figure it out. So I'm just saying, I've given you pretty simple analogies. The swimmer, the boat, the rower. Why exactly do you need that visually created for you? I'm just saying, if you can't really accomplish that task of visualizing something as simple as swimmers getting into boats and then the other guy leaves, then you're probably hopeless. You probably can't really judge a physics theory if you're that fucking stupid, in the sense that your brain doesn't have that much organization that it can imagine something that simple. It can't make the simple movie itself in your own imagination. So if you can't do that, I'm basically making the argument he's not a physicist worth talking to, because he's got to be really, really, really dim in terms of his function. Obviously, any scientist who hears your theory will have the first thought that it's stupid and dismiss it. Well, if that's what they're doing, then I'm just saying they're, obviously that's carrying a bias, isn't it? Just show me the better example. Just point me to the video somewhere on the internet of an explanation of why there's this attraction and repulsion in magnetism. Some explanation of what the virtual photons are. Some explanation of how they function. Point me to that video that explains how a magnet works. And then I'll just put my little 5-minute clip next to it. And I'm just saying, if you can reasonably say, I can't see which explanation could possibly be better, or which one's more detailed, or which one is a better explanation, and you're going to say that honestly, then fine. But you're not providing any challenge to anything I've said, and you're clearly not in any way challenging my assertion that my model is the first model of magnetism that is complete and actually makes some kind of sense. It's somewhere near rational. Anyway. But how would she go about verifying it if it is true? The verification is the fact that it fits the existing evidence. So I don't know why, again, people keep thinking there has to be new evidence. No, your interpretation of evidence is shit. As I pointed out with the radar 2-slit experiment, clearly the mathematics for jamming is exactly the same as the mathematics for wave interference. And you in no way have in any way accounted for how it can't be just the simple fact that you jammed the signal. You're giving the radio receiver 2 signals at the same time, and they're a little bit out of phase, and it can't decide, I'm only going to hear this one, or I'm only going to hear that one. It can't differentiate. It's seeing a frequency it can't detect. And it's that simple, that when you put the 2 signals in out of phase into the radio receiver, it has no hope of filtering a signal out. All right. Create her own computer model. And again, I'm just saying that the model's so simple. Okay, why do I need a computer to do it? Obviously, I need a computer to make a boat, you could say, and I need a computer to make a CGI swimmer. I'm just saying the concept is so simple. You don't need to do it with a computer. You can do it with your own brain. Your brain, if I say the word Bugs Bunny, your brain can come up with, ears and gray and rabbity looking. Your brain can do that. I don't have to do it for you. So pretending that you're all so fucking lame that you have no imagination skills at all, that you can't handle any thought experiment, Even if it's really simple, like what goes up comes down. Oh, you can't figure that out. You can't imagine that. I have to draw you a fucking picture of that? Come on. Do some math first. Again, I'm not disputing 93% of the math is fine. The only mathematics I'm disputing is the bullshit, fake function math. Obviously, you don't mean that. Again, I'm not disputing all of Maxwell's equations are fine. I mean, I'd still say they're wrong because they've split a single constant, the speed of light, into two constants. So they're not complete formulas in the sense that they haven't been made as efficient as they could be by realizing it's only one constant and that there is no such thing as permutivity of space or permeability of space. That's just bullshit. But the math is fine. I mean, it comes up with the right answer, generally speaking. So it's why don't you just cite the mathematics that my theory is in conflict with? Cite the formula that somehow has variables in it that my formula doesn't, that my simulation doesn't have. Show me the variables I'm denying, like distance or velocity. I'm denying that a frequency, okay, that when a car goes 60 miles an hour, that you can call that a frequency. You can say it has a frequency of 70 megahertz. It doesn't. I'm saying that's horse shit. Maybe he sits down and uses Volkish intuition or something. Nietzschean. So, whatever. You're just talking rubbish, so, forget it. Wasting time on this planet. So here he is again. Oh, the same guy. Like I said, it's all, same idiot. Oh, and hey, dipstick, the experiment is whether electricity neutral particles. It's whether electrically neutral particles, that means particles not affected by electrical forces. So again, this argument that there is such a thing is stupid. There's electrons and protons. Clearly they're affected. And then there's dipoles like neutrons. Now, the reason why neutrons aren't affected, okay, is because you have to get close to a magnet to tell it's a magnet. The further away you get from the magnet. So when you're close to a magnet, you can see there's blue coming out of one side and red coming out of the other side. As you get further and further away, all you see is the purple. Okay, that's it. You don't see any blue anymore, and you don't see any red anymore. So you have to get close to these little tiny bits. And the point of the argument is nothing gets close to the neutron except for the protons that are being stuck to it. So it isn't neutral when it's in the nucleus. It's neutral when it's out in free space. Well, then a neutron is neutral, but it's not neutral when it's in the nucleus. It's a magnet. You can't see it. It's a small magnet. Can be affected by magnetic fields. This directly disputes your claim. So again, it doesn't directly dispute any of my claims that electrons and protons are charged. They're the source of charge. They're the magnetic monopoles. So you haven't disputed anything. You haven't cited any experiment. You haven't decided any fact. This directly disputes your claim that the electron and the proton are the magnetic monopoles of the universe. How? Where did you do that? So let's do this again. Okay, the experiment is whether electricity, he doesn't even cite what experiment he means, is whether electrically neutral particles, that means particles not affected by electric forces. So again, what particles aren't affected by charge? So you haven't explained that. Can be affected by magnetic fields. So I guess it's the Stern-Gerlach. So they're not electrically neutral in the sense they've just been heated so hot that they flew off the material. Okay? There's every reason to think they're charged particles, as even atoms, that they're atomic dipoles, that they're ions. There's every reason to believe the atoms are positive and negative ions, because the only reason why you're getting them through the experiment is because you have harassed them so aggressively to shoot them off the material with so much heat. So they're ions. Ions are intrinsically not neutral, idiot. All right, so it doesn't directly dispute. So clearly Stern-Gerlach doesn't dispute a damn thing I've said. Half of they conceded the point. So fuck you, you're an idiot. Your claim that the electron and the proton are the magnetic monopoles of the universe, period. All right, so he says he proved something, didn't prove anything at all. That's why he's mentioning the Stern-Gerlach experiment, and you probably already know this, but shamefully you've got to go do the rhetorical equivalent of plugging up the ears and singing la la la. So where did I do that? What I said clearly was, show me the Stern-Gerlach experiment ever performed on electrons. Oh, that's right, it never happened. So, and then I clearly explained why the atoms would not travel a straight line in an irregular magnetic field is because, yes, they're going to become polar, and they're going to either become positive or negative ions. Gee, not complicated. All right. So anyway, so just more crap. Sam, I am. Asshole, you is. All right. Oh, wait. That's okay. Oh, and on the subject of hobgoblins, so I guess we're back to the cowboy or something. Guess what? It's no different than saying red and blue twan's done it. So again, he's saying it's the same thing. There's an equivalence between saying virtual photon and saying particle that's either electron reflective or proton reflective. See, I have a theory about the universe. I think there's just one force and is responsible for all the observed phenomenon in the universe. There, I solved physics. Well, that's not what I did it? Is it? No, I did a lot more than that. I explained to you how magnets don't make energy, that they're filters, and that they're filtering something, and what they're filtering is a force that has an identifiable different character. Yeah, so I did a lot more, and this is just more cheap talk from anonymous, girly boy cowards. Well, I think we can just hide him from this channel for now. It's enough of his crap. Alright, another one by the same idiot. And it was so easy. None of that pesky math to build a bridge between theory and what we actually observe. So again, the pesky math says that a single photon goes into a single slit and magically falls apart, splits into two wave functions that interfere with themselves from the same photon, to create a simple thing. And all that simple thing that happens is the photon changes. It can deflect 3 degrees, it can deflect 6 degrees, it can deflect 9 degrees, it can deflect 12 degrees. That's the simple fact. That's what's really observed. And they have to come up with all this convoluted nonsense to explain something as simple as a consistent angle change. That I could explain that, well, if every electron you hit changed the momentum of the electron 3 degrees, then all you could say is if the photon hits 4 electrons, then it's 12 degrees. Not that complicated. I don't have to verify any claims because my claims are so vague. No, yours are the ones that are vague. Your evidence is vague and arguably incomprehensibly insane. The fact that you don't even have the right shaped mirror to do your lensing. And you're not accounting for any of the facts. You don't account for the double slit pattern having 2 patterns. You don't account for the multi-slit pattern being images projected. And you don't account for what splits a photon in half when it goes into a single fucking slit. You don't explain any of it. That there's any way of testing it at all. Well, there's absolutely no way to test your theory because, and clearly the evidence doesn't even match it. Where at least I can explain the evidence. That is, in a nutshell, you have to explain the evidence by inventing dark matter and entanglement and all kinds of nonsense. That is, in a nutshell, what the DraftScience is, because you have particles that do whatever you want whenever you need them to. No, I have a simpler model. They do very simple things. 2 kinds of force, 2 kinds of matter bit, and 2 kinds of interaction. That's all there is. It's simpler than your theory, and it's more complete in terms of its coverage of the evidence than your theory. Those are the facts. You haven't demonstrated how your model's either simpler or how it's more complete. And again, you haven't shown me your great explanation of how a magnet works. And clearly your explanation of how gravity works is just completely invisible band bullshit. Some bent geodesic did it. Why don't you explain to me how electrons and protons in atoms are converted into bent space. Why don't you explain to me how a gravity wave is created? How the matter, the electrons and protons, turn into magical energy, magical whatever, bending, and hurl billions of light years through the universe to vibrate some Lego device. Why don't you explain all that shit? Oh, there's a friction problem. No biggie. They just happen to tip tap, so there's no friction problem, so we won't even bother with that. Oh, there's a problem with the Young experiment and how there are more dark bands than one slit is opened. The Young experiment is so crude, it's laughable, as anybody arguing it means anything. Newton had already done all of these experiments 150 years before Young. Young is meaningless in terms of his contribution to the physics. There's no meaningful contribution. Newton had already discovered Newton's rings, idiot. Fact. It's just a fact, idiot. Oh, the twans have memory, so they have, yes, they, just like every human being has a memory of where they grow up, how many cars hit them, how many birds shit in their eye. Yes, we all have life experience, and yes, electrons have a history. It's true. Where they were in space several seconds or minutes or hours ago. Yes, it's stored as a function of their angular velocity through space. Where they're going is a byproduct of where they've been and what they've interacted with. Yes, just like us, idiot. Oh, there's a problem with the pesky images in space showing bending light of galaxies. Well, it's not showing any of that, actually. So why don't you show me the image? Show me your great evidence of lensing, and I'll show you how it doesn't make any mathematical sense, and that you have to explain why the lensing image doesn't fit the geometry that's required. The circles aren't circular. Why aren't they a circle? What distorted it after the lensing? So the lensing made the ring. What distorted the ring? Because it couldn't be gravity, because gravity is really symmetrical in large gravity. No one asserts that black holes are irregularly shaped. All right. Oh, that's just an aphorism or something. Well, fuck you, clearly. Just fuck you. Eek. Nonsense arguments. Some more. Like I said, just an obsession. Just so obsessed. And yet he can't make one real physics argument. Can't cite an experiment. I could do that too, because it's real easy to make up post hoc explanations. All explanations are post hoc. You have to see the phenomena before you start describing what caused it. Read excuses for why your stupid toy model doesn't fit the evidence. Again, where are the excuses? Where doesn't it fit the evidence? Or if you have some serious gall to just deny the evidence entirely, like what evidence? You're the ones who make up experiments that never happened. So why don't you show me the detector experiments that are routinely cited that never took place? But it's real hard to make a theory consistent with evidence. Well, it's really hard to find any evidence that Eddington's experiment was ever verified, ever. Okay, that there's any, that anybody's ever repeated it successfully. You see, my theory only uses one force, and it's powerful, and it affects different bits completely different ways. Yes, 2 + 2 + 2. Simple functions. That's right. It's simpler, and it covers the evidence more completely. Again, you have it demonstrate how it doesn't do those two things. Being simpler than your crazy, insane model, and being more complete in terms of explaining why magnets work. This is just a waste of time, clearly. Same argument over and over and over again. Ah, stupid YouTube is such a pain in the ass. I just want to see the comments, please. Please. Not just one comment, all the comments. It's not doing anything useful now. What do I have to do? Not doing a damn thing here. Still, it's doing the damn video. I don't want the comments for the one video. Oh, this is such a stupid fucking... Every time they fix something, they just break it. see. Yeah, look at all this crap. All right. Anyway, last one. Yay. If it makes one ton float, another ton sting. It's tougher than diamonds. Whips like cream. Well, yeah, whatever. It's just this poetry bullshit. It's just such a waste of time. Alright. Oh, finally. How many times a day do the hands of an analog clock make a straight line? So because clocks are round, there's no straight lines in the world. Pyramids are crooked. Well, just all the things that have a straight line, all the millions and billions of things that have a straight line, all of a sudden there's no straight lines because clocks are round. What's your argument? How does the fact that sundials aren't round? Let's see, there's other kinds of clocks, certainly. You can make clocks in all kinds of different shapes in terms of the function. You can create all kinds of geysers, can be clocks. I mean, how big an idiot are you? Anyway, what times are they? So again, what are you talking about? You should be able to do this. Do what? Given that you are a physics major and all that. Just logically, what's your argument? What is your argument? Yes, the clock face is circular. It's not the only clock in town. And because you can make a round clock, does that mean there's no straight lines? That's, I guess, is what he's arguing. I don't know. But he's just too stupid. Just hopelessly stupid. Alright, so then there was, there's stuff in the spam folder. So it's probably not in there now because I did block whatever. So it's the same thing. Thing 1. I have to ask, what exactly do you mean when you say that a physicist should be able to figure it out? So we already read that one. So he posted it more than once. Alright, so, here's the Gelfeld. So this is the cowboy actually outing himself for a change. I think it's pretty cool that you actually did the computer simulation of something resembling your model. Kudos for that, although I'd say that it doesn't really help since it doesn't prove that there isn't still a friction velocity problem. Well, again, it explains why there's good reason to believe there isn't a problem. It just gives you a perfectly viable mechanism for solving the drag issue. First, by recognizing drag does exist. That's why electrons and protons are dragged to a halt, which is a fact. So you want to dispute the fact that electrons and protons don't have perpetual motion? When you give them velocity, they lose it in any medium, empty space, doesn't matter where they are. So in empty space, electrons lose velocity. Do you believe that or do you not believe that? But nevertheless, good job on the personal growth. Okay, he's doing the same thing. So we already did read it. All right, so never mind. Oh, good. Yeah, we don't have to read the same crap twice. Electrically neutral particles. Yeah, it's all the same crap. All right. So, fuck off. And die, and all that kind of crap. Soon. Please. Do me a favor. Alright, so we could play a little bit of a Puro video just for the hell of it. And then we'll call it quits. Let's see. Yeah. So he makes these, he just keeps making these assertions like he's somehow demonstrated something doesn't work or something doesn't make sense or and certainly classifies, like if you're a dissident, you're somehow in this class or this group, even if you don't want to be. But and you're a science denier, so that's really anti-science, which is just offensive to me. Because it's really about whether you're going to be reasonable and whether you give a shit about logic. And you people obviously don't. The truth doesn't matter to you. And the only way to get to the truth is to use logic and evidence. Facts. Use facts. Facts are, like I say, you collect them and they point to other facts. That's how it works. And you don't want to play by those rules.
Doesn't really make them the same kind of flavor, the same kind of emotion, the same kind of experiences when you're sorting out your experiences. So, Gary had said in this video I watched of his, I was trying him out, And people just want things to be true. Then he
So he did say too that I guess he saw the simulation, and he did offer to clean it up. He says like it needs cleaning. You have to understand the theory before you could even do anything constructive in terms of building a model of it. And you frankly haven't spent enough time to even understand, even though it's so simple, 2 plus 2 plus 2. You really haven't absorbed any of that. And so what use would you be in attempting to figure out how to model, in the sense of, figuring out complex questions in terms of the modeling software where the two objects get, touch each other, and what happens, what's the consequence, how do I make that like the reality? Because in the model, it's not going to be the same as the reality.
also said that his system can't not work.
So I'm just saying, show me where it doesn't work. Yes, it doesn't fail to explain the phenomenons we have real good evidence exists. Okay, so it succeeds to explain what we see. So what am I supposed to say? I mean, he's saying that somehow I should be doing this differently than I'm doing it. That if he had the right idea and knew that, oh yeah, this is so obvious that they just started with a bunch of broken axioms. The conventional physics, they bought into to assumptions, and they wouldn't let go of them. Like the idea that Jesus exists or that angels exist. And they wouldn't let go of the notion that somehow I have to make angels fit into the diagram. And that's how their stupid standard model got so convoluted, is because they could never let go of a previous premise, a previous established assumption. And like the idea that electrons cause something when they move, like somehow electrons are different when they're moving than when they're stationary. When no, they're exactly the same. All they're doing is moving a force from over here, a mirror from here to over here, or to over here. They're just changing where the mirror is. They're not making anything. All those kind of dumb assumptions.
It shouldn't have to be.
But I'm just saying, if he had some notion of a truth, and then he attempted to explain it to somebody else, that somehow he would do it different than any of these people. He thinks thorium is could save the day. It's in terms of a way of doing nuclear power, and so he asserts it and tries to argue it. He does it so ineffectively, and would he argue that it's because he's ineffective in making the argument, or could he possibly argue that people are just belligerently glued to their stupid notions? So instead of conceding that he runs into this brick wall all the time, that these brick walls are made of convention, and conventional notions will not solve future problems, that people have to be innovative and come up with new ideas. And he's just doing exactly what the brick wall does. And then he's preaching to other people about how to be, when he gives a shit, you have to be, we have to go out there and break down these brick walls. But when he's part of the brick wall, no, he's like, no, you can't touch our wall. We made our wall out of real bricks. We know thorium's stupid because it sounds stupid. Thorium. Oh, no, that sounds really gay. Fuck that. Okay, so, you're just defending exactly the thing that oppresses you. You are the Nazis.
Interested in Gary's simulation, which is cool. Like, I was thinking I would help with that simulation. I told him, give me the source code, I'll clean it up for you.
Yeah, he's just so full of himself. Like he's a better coder than the coder, right? He doesn't even know the guy, doesn't know nothing about him, and he's already saying, I can fix it. Fuck you.
He says it can't not work. Like, he's figured it out. He knows people just project that their system is going to be correct, and then he does that and says it can't not work, and it's up.
No, I didn't say. So again, it's all this misparaphrase. I've explained the mistakes. I mean, obviously, accepting Einstein's bent space was because there was a vacuum of ideas. Nobody had an idea. They said particles can't work because of drag. Well, I've solved that problem, so they shouldn't have thrown out the thing that mock gravity, right? They call it mock gravity because it works and it's a really good teaching tool. So they keep the particle model because it's a good teaching tool and it works. Okay, for gravity. Yeah, it doesn't work in free space and all that stuff because of this drag issue. So one little thing, they knocked it down, said fuck it. So it's a 350-year-old idea. They've been ragging on it ever from the beginning of time because they want some kind of wavical thingy. They want some sort of magical force that does everything. There's a clear bias. there's a clear bias, clearly, because they don't want a deterministic universe either. So you could say that there is a little bit of religion has seeped in the sense that people don't want evolution as the answer, even if God did it on purpose. Made the evidence for evolution. Put the dinosaur, God put the dinosaur bones in the ground. you know,
And to me, this gets down to feelings that are of interest, like of being honest. Now, you can think you're
stuff being honest. So this is just amazing. So he's making some accusation that there's some sort of lack of credulity or honesty in terms of what this whole process is, when the entire process has been public. I start off with a kernel of I know that's got to be wrong, this one little bit, and now I just by poking at your silly physics, I found that, oh yeah, it's fundamentally wrong because it relies on this stupid wave shit, magical forces. ESP is all over the place here in terms of somehow things know how to react without ever interacting to know how to react. No, they have to interact. You don't have any interactors. You call them bent space and virtual photon. That's no explanation for anything.
telling the truth and you're incorrect, so it's not the truth, but you will feel honest. And you can tell people lies, know that they're lies, and you will feel dishonest. Now, you might enjoy it.
Yeah, well, you're the one who presented the obviously broken evidence in the slit argument, right? trying to say that a single slit in water creates an interference pattern, when clearly it doesn't. All right, so what did he do? He went out and found a piece of evidence, and the evidence was obviously garbage because they were putting waves into the slit that were already interfering with each other. There were already more than one frequency, and they were already overlapping. And he put that through the single slit and then says, look, noise in, noise out. And somehow that's what photons are doing, that they're interfering before they even get to the slit. No, that's not the argument. So again, you're the one using the fake evidence and making the assertions without any evidence. So you just keep making arguments, and yet you provide no evidence of how your theory's right. Why don't you show me the conclusive evidence that photons are bent by gravity? Show me the conclusive experimental evidence showing photons being bent. I mean, evidence that just can't possibly be denied because it's so obvious. It's magnifying glass obvious. You can just take a magnifying glass and look at it and you can see it. You're not doing that. It's not like you're saying, I know that, here, I'm going to prove there's microbes. Here's a magnifying glass. Look through it and you'll see the little buggers moving around in the fluid. That's real evidence. Show me evidence of that integrity demonstrating photons being bent. You don't have it. You don't have anything close to it.
That feeling. So people enjoy the feeling of being dishonest.
So again, why should I? He has no excuse for making this accusation that I've said a single thing in any of my videos that is dishonest, that I have somehow ever cheated in such a way where I cited evidence that doesn't exist, or said somebody said something to verify what I'm saying. Where is there a single shred of evidence of my dishonesty here? You're just such a scumbag, you fucking pedophile. You just make these accusations, you misparaphrase people, you're a disgusting human being.
Right? And the point is, you will feel dishonest. Whether for you it's good or bad, you'll feel like a dishonest feeling. And an honest feeling, you have to actually believe you're being.
Yes, well, it doesn't matter. What does this have to do with the argument? I mean, you projecting this emotional rubbish into the argument. My arguments are kind of simple. You have no evidence for your confidence. You have all this confidence in your theory, and yet it doesn't have any evidence. And so I play the videos of the physicists saying, this is the nail in the coffin evidence. And then they'll talk about an experiment they never did, about detecting things they never detected, and what the consequences are, and what the results were of the experiment they never fucking did. And then you're going to imply that I have an honesty problem or I have a delusion? No, they clearly have the delusion. They have a delusion that they have hard evidence when they have weak evidence. I can play you a documentary where they're talking about Einstein. They spend 15 minutes on Einstein's angst because nobody could do this eclipse experiment. It's been demonstrated the experiment was crap. And you're going to keep asserting that was really great proof, that the Eddington experiment was great proof? Come on. Yeah, I mean, you're so fucking dishonest if you can say that. If you can say it was a great proof, you're so fucking dishonest. You would go into court and convict somebody of murder based on the integrity of the Eddington experiment. So if the Eddington experiment being a profound proof that photons are bent was somehow critical to convicting a murderer, you'd feel okay about it. You'd give him the electric fucking chair based on that piece of fucking crap as evidence? And tell me you would honestly do that. That you'd convict somebody of jaywalking based on that fucking evidence. You don't even have the right to sit there and say somebody's not using the right deodorant based on that shitty evidence. It's so bad. You'd be committing a crime to say somebody, is whatever, to establish how tall they are based on that evidence. It's so bad.
Honest. Now, if you fool yourself into thinking you're honest and you're not, then the feeling of being honest that you have is a fake feeling. You don't really know because you actually have to be honest.
Yeah, so you're all retarded is the simple argument, okay? Retards can think they're very good drivers when they suck at driving. And all the physicists think they're very good thinkers. And I'm a very good logician. I'm very good at weighing evidence. I'm very good at very smart at organizing. When clearly it can be demonstrated, no, you're really bad at it. Because every time you see something, you think, oh, the simplest pattern in the universe. Ah, wave interference. Wave interference, on-off pattern. Every time you see a wave, an on-off pattern, you think it's wave interference. When no, there's about 1 million different phenomenon that could create this simple on-off pattern. I mean, people are hopelessly stupid, and you're just so deluded. You're like the retard. You just keep validating each other and just keep saying, "Well, we're all very good drivers," when you haven't paid any attention to the fact that you've so jumped reasonable conclusion. You've taken a tiny bit of evidence and just slandered the defendant. You've just slandered the fuck out of him, okay? Because he, winced once at a woman, he therefore has committed 468 rapes. Fuck you. You're a lousy, rotten piece of shit as a human being. Why don't you make a video with something called an argument where you actually present some sort of evidence that your physics has integrity, that you haven't just, like I said, that somehow the theory of dark matter has some kind of integrity, when it's just purely no evidence for it at all, and it merely exists because nobody can disprove your God theory, your phantom matter theory. And that's all. That's the reason why it exists as a theory. It's because nobody can say, yes, the invisible man doesn't exist. Here's the proof. And that's the only reason why most of your theories exist. Is because, well, of course, I can't prove that, photons don't have ESP. And this is just so stupid. All right. So enough of that. So enough for this video. Yes, work to do. I have been working on the website, getting better. The text is getting, little bit by little, paragraph by paragraph, and such. So until the next time, blah, 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 blah.